over to you.
Hey, thanks, Tam. So my name's Rhiannon Ford, and I'm a divorce and separation consultant. So what on earth does that mean? So I provide help, support, and guidance to people at all different stages of the separation and divorce process. So my background is that I was a family law solicitor. So I'm an ex-lawyer. I don't practice as a solicitor any longer. I leave that to all the other solicitors, but I set up my business to provide specialist support for people, because it's not just legal advice you need when you're going through relationship breakdown. There's so much going on, and I wanted to make sure people got the right help from the right people. What we're going to be focusing on today is, I work with people at all the different stages, but where I take on most of my clients is at the very beginning stages. So that's people who are either considering separating, or a decision has been made either by them or their other half that there's going to be a separation or a divorce. And often people haven't yet embarked on the legal process. So they haven't gone to see a solicitor, or maybe they don't feel ready to see a solicitor. So that's where I feel I can sort of add the most value. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And then, as Tam said, we've had some questions in, and I'll go through those, the answers, because I've had a bit of a chance to think about things. So I wanted to start off with saying that obviously going through separation or divorce is a very difficult time. That's a complete understatement. For most people, it's possibly the most stressful thing they're going through, and there's going to be a lot going through people's minds. And it's really important, I think, to get the right help from the right people at the right time. And I think the danger is that when we're in times of stress, we can understandably panic and go on to Mr. Google, for example, and there's a lot of great information out there, but as we all know, the internet is not regulated, so it's difficult for us to know whether the information that we're reading is actually correct, or whether it's correct for us in our situation. So what I want to talk about today is things to think about, how to prepare, and what to expect from the legal process. So when you are in the early stages of a separation, what I always say to my clients is the starting point is to think about the three important topics in relation to your situation. And those are, number one, your relationship. So that's your relationship with your partner. So are you married? Are you not married? Do you want to become unmarried? Or if you're not married, obviously divorce isn't an issue. So number one, what would you like to happen with your relationship? Number two, and this isn't in order of importance, but number two is finances. Chances are, if you're in a relationship with somebody and you've got a family with them, you're financially linked to each other. You might have a house together, you might have a joint account, or one of you might be supporting the other one financially, while one of you stays at home to care for the kids and the other one goes out to work. So what would your thoughts be about what financial arrangement you would like to achieve when you go through your separations? That's number two. And then number three, of course, is the most important issue, which is the children. And it's worth having a think about, when you're no longer living with your partner, what type of parenting arrangement do you think could work for your children? So the focus is what works best for the children. So that's always a good starting point, is to have a think about those three issues: the relationship, the finances, and the children. Now, I'm not suggesting you're going to know, you're going to know exactly what you should be thinking about, but you'll probably have a few ideas about what's going through your mind, what your concerns are. So what tends to come from thinking about those three issues is, well, hang on a minute, I've got a lot of questions about that. I need to find out what happens if I divorce, what I need to find out. So what will happen then is it will quite naturally generate questions. And the best thing to do is to write them all down. Even if it's a bit of a brain dump, write down a full list of what your questions are, things you don't know that you think you need to find out, things that are concerning you, the what if ... type thing, so that you've got a full list, or as full as it can be, of all the things you feel, right, I need to find out all of this. Now, it could be quite stressful doing that. It could be quite uncomfortable because none of us like thinking we don't know things. And the danger is to jump into, oh my God, and to think of worst case scenario, and this is going to cost me a fortune, and the solicitors are going to take me for every penny, and or whatever it is. But the starting point is to get really clear for yourself what questions you have about your situation. And it can be about anything. It doesn't have to be particularly legal questions. It can be, you know, what happens with the kids, or what should I be thinking about if this happens? Just get as much clarity as you can about what information you need. And then the next step is to think about where's the most appropriate place to find out the answers to these questions. So as part of preparing yourself for, you know, the next step with regards to your separation or divorce, or in actual fact, wherever you are in the process. So even if you're already in the process, so you get really clear on your questions, and then what you need to do is then think about, well, who's the best person to answer each of those questions? Because what tends to happen in a separation and divorce situation is, as I said earlier, it's not just legal questions that are going to come up for you. There are going to be lots of different issues that are going to come up quite naturally, because, you know, this is your family, this is your marriage, this is your partner, this is your children. Lots of things are going to need to be considered. So it's not just the legal stuff. There's going to be practical issues to think about. There's going to be emotional issues with regards to the breakdown of the relationship. There's going to be children issues, obviously, with the arrangements for the kids. So there's going to be lots of different types, financial issues, that's obviously a biggie. So there's going to be lots of different types of help and support and guidance that you might need, which is quite common to, you know, all those things that I've mentioned. And then we need to work out who's the best person, or where can I find that information to answer those questions. There's a lot of information online, as I said, but you need to make sure you go to the right websites. So I'll go through that in a sec. But there are quite obviously, I suppose everybody knows this already, there are going to be specialist professionals that will be able to help with your situation. And what's really important to save you time, money and stress is to make sure you ask the right professional the right questions. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's easier for me to explain what not to do. So for example, if you go for advice from a family law solicitor, please don't use them for emotional support. And you, of course, need emotional support. Of course, you need to be able to talk through your situation and how you're feeling about everything. But your solicitor is there for the legal advice and legal representation. They're there for the functional side of things with regards to the formalities, if you like. And they're normally very friendly people, family law solicitors. That's why they've chosen that area of law. But they are not the best person to provide you with personal and emotional support. You're better off talking to somebody such as myself, a divorce consultant or coach, or if you feel that you need additional support, perhaps from a counsellor, a therapist, or of course, if you've got, if you're very close to a family member or friend. But it's important to keep your costs down with the solicitor. And that's always a question I get asked. How do I keep my costs down with the solicitor? The big thing is only use them for what they should be used for. And so be very careful that you only ask them or use them for the legal advice. So the family law solicitor is going to be an important part of your support team, your divorce team, as well as, I know I would say this, but as well as having a good coach and consultant. So I'm a coach and consultant. I do provide advice, but not formal legal advice. But because I have a legal background, obviously, and I've been doing this work for sort of 21 years, hopefully by now I know how it all works. So hopefully I'll be able to help. So your support team is really important at the beginning so that you have the right people in place to help with things. And that team is your divorce coach, divorce consultant, definitely your family law solicitor, possibly a financial advisor if your finances are quite complicated, or if you just need help with deciphering your finances or thinking about how to plan for your financial future, that they can be very helpful in divorce situations. And then I mentioned, obviously, the possibility of a counsellor or any particular type of therapist that you think might help you. So yes, so that's you're getting the right team in place, the support system in place is really important and can make quite a difference from the early stages to have the right people in place going along throughout your sort of divorce and separation journey. And it's really helpful, I think, for people to have some direction as to how to find these people. So there are literally hundreds of family law solicitors, for example, all around the country. So how do you choose one? And I work with a lot of clients to try and find the right fit for them. So we all hope, obviously, that these professionals with these qualifications know their stuff. But what we'll want is to make sure that we feel comfortable working with them. So if anybody is looking for a family law solicitor or is wondering how to find a family law solicitor, a great resource, and actually it's got lots of other brilliant resources, actually, come to think of it, but a great resource is the Resolution website. So that's www.resolution.org.uk. And you can look up on there and it's got a directory of family law specialist solicitors and financial advisors that specialise in divorce. So it's a really good way, if you haven't had a recommendation from a friend or family member, that's where I would suggest people look for solicitors and financial advisors for divorce and separation. We don't have, so divorce consultants and divorce coaches, we don't have a directory as such. So the best way is to go through recommendation and to look people up, look at their website, have an initial chat with people, maybe ring a couple of different, consultants or solicitors or financial advisors, find the person that you're going to feel most comfortable working with. And obviously, the other important thing is to ask them about their fees. So you know what the difference in costs and how they charge, because that obviously a lot of people worry about costs and automatically think it's going to cost a small fortune, and it doesn't need to. I promise you, it doesn't need to. So yeah, practical step number one is get your team in place. Practical step number two is what I mentioned before, which is write down all your questions and concerns. What I would say, so I know I mentioned about making sure you ask the right person the right question. Don't worry too much if you can't decide, well, do I ask the solicitor that one or do I ask? That's what people like me do. So often people will come to me at the beginning stages and we will sit down and either look at their list of questions or we'll work on it together, and then I can then signpost them. Either I'll answer the question or I will find a man who can, type thing. I'll make sure they get answers to what they need. Because the most important thing for me really is for people to be able to make informed decisions about their situation. Because when you're going through separation and divorce, it can be quite confusing. You might feel a little bit intimidated maybe by the potential of a legal process. A lot of people have never used a solicitor before, and then there's all this sort of scary legal jargon. What on earth does that mean? Do I have to go to court? The answer to that is no, you shouldn't have to go to court. That's like your last resort if everything else has failed. So I think it's really important to find out your options and your choices and to get answers to your questions so that you can think for yourself what you would like to do and how you would like to do it, and make sure you then get support and guidance to put that in place. So practical steps we've done: get your support team in place, get your list of questions. The other thing that's really helpful is for you to start thinking about what finances there are in relation to your family. So as part of sorting out your separation or divorce, you'll need to be looking at money stuff. You're going to need to be thinking about the family home, who's going to pay for what's going to happen with pensions, what's going to happen. So whoever you ask for advice from, they're going to want to know as much information as you can provide about your family finances. Now, if you're the person in the relationship that always ran the money side of things, that's probably going to be fairly straightforward for you. You might have, I've got quite a few clients that've got quite snazzy spreadsheets of, you know, what they've got and where it is and all the rest of it. If you were not the money manager in the relationship and think, gosh, I've no idea, my husband or my wife was, or my partner was always in charge of that bit, I haven't got a clue. Please don't worry. Just think about what you do know, because I bet you know more than you think you do. And just start to jot down, you know, because when you talk to, say, me or a solicitor or a financial advisor, we don't know anything about you. So even if you can tell us, we've got a house and, you know, I've looked on Zoopla and I think it might be worth this, or, well, I know he's got a pension with the last job, you know, anything you can just start to pull together can be really helpful, and it can help with the professionals answering questions as well. So yeah, so gather together as much information as you can about your finances, and that's going to be really helpful for whoever you ask for advice from. The next point about how best to prepare is to do what you can to have access to money. And that's two reasons. One is to pay for professional help, advice, because I would always recommend, even if you don't have your full divorce support team I described earlier, you will at least need one or two of those people that I suggested. Investment, I promise you, it's an investment for you to get the right advice about your particular situation. Because the other thing about looking at things on the internet, of course, is it's just generic information. It's not necessarily relevant to your situation. So you'll want to find out the answers to your questions rather than just general information that just asks more questions. So having access to money, and I don't mean, you know, thousands. What I mean is for two reasons. One is so you've got some money to come and see, I don't know, somebody like me, or to book in to see a solicitor for an hour or a financial advisor, whatever it is. But also to have an emergency fund, just so you've got access. So if the worst happened, and I'm afraid I'm a bit cynical because of what I do for a living, but say, for example, you and your ex fell out really badly, and he or she was the one where all the bank accounts were in their name, or they were the one that was providing you with money, and then you had a big row and they decided to pull the plug. It's important, obviously, for you to make sure that you've got access to money. So as an emergency fund for your expenses, we'll be able to put it right. Just want to put it out there that the solicitor, of course, will make sure everything's put right if your ex does do the dirty. But it's really helpful for you to feel you taking back some control. You've got access to some money for yourself for what you need to do. So yeah, so having the funds available can be really helpful. And then the other thing that's really useful when for yourself, as well as if you're going to talk to any divorce professionals, is to do a written note, a bit like a chronology of dates, relevant dates about your relationship. So the date you got together, the date you moved in together, the date you got married, the dates of birth of the children, the date that you separated, that sort of thing. And that can be really helpful. You're going to know all of that off the top of your head, but actually writing it down can be really helpful if you were in a meeting with a professional, for example, and you might, you know, be a bit nervous and think, oh my goodness, I've just forgotten the date that I got married. So just having that note there so that you can either hand it to them at the beginning and get brownie points that you're super organized because you know in advance that that information is going to be helpful, or just have notes with you. And I would always say that, actually, I'm a big notes person, but I would always say that if you talk to any professional, feel free to have notes in front of you so that you don't forget things. It's easy to forget things when we're stressed. So having notes in front of you, your list of questions, and definitely take a notebook with you so that you can write things down. Because if you're anything like me, I forget things 5 minutes later. So I always say to my clients on meetings on Zoom, I do apologize if you just can see the top of my head quite a bit while you're telling me your story, because I'm making sure I'm writing it all down because it helps me process information. And that's absolutely fine. Don't feel you need to remember everything. Have your list of questions, take a notebook and pen, or obviously if it's on Zoom, have it all ready on your table or on your desk. Because what you'll want to do is feel as I was going to say relaxed. Not many people feel relaxed necessarily, but you're going to want to feel as comfortable as possible whilst you're talking about what can be quite obviously very sensitive issues. It's about your family, it's about your relationship with your ex and your children. So do what you can to keep yourself calm and prepared so that the professional knows what help you need from them, because that will save you a lot of time and possibly money as well. So the clearer you are about the help you need from the professional, even if it's you've typed out 20 questions and you hand it to them, I promise you they won't mind that. I actually quite like it, because then I know exactly what help my client wants from me, and we can then go through it together. They get the answers to the questions that are important to them. Okay, so the 3 topics to think about are your relationship, your finances, and your children, and what you would like to happen ideally in all those with all those situations. And then just to recap, practical steps to take to get ready, and that's, you know, from the start. It doesn't mean just before the meeting, it's just to help you feel as comfortable and confident as you can, is to think about and to take some steps to get your support team in place, to do your big brain dump of questions, issues, concerns, what ifs, so that you know what you need to find out, and then to work out who's the best person to answer these particular questions. Are they all legal questions? Is it just a solicitor I need? And please don't worry if you ask somebody. So I don't provide formal legal advice now. I act as a consultant. So for example, if a client asks me a question and I know, oh, that's a formal legal advice question, I'm not going to be offended or annoyed that they've asked me that. I'm just going to say, oh, do you know what? That's a question for your solicitor. What else have you got? What else can I help with? So please don't worry. There's no reason why you would know necessarily who to ask what. But hopefully, if you worked with somebody such as myself, for example, that's a lot of what I do with people, is to try and break it down, see where we can get the help and from whom. Okay. So the next thing, and Tam, do tell me if I'm watching on too long. The next thing I wanted to talk about is just to give you some things to think about as to what to expect from the legal process. So as I mentioned, you may never have worked with a solicitor before, for example. You may know nothing about legal documents and the funny language that's used by the lawyers. And that, you know, that could feel quite scary. It could feel quite intimidating. The professionals are there to work for you. They are there to help you as much as they can. So please try not to worry too much. And they do this for a living. So they are very used to people feeling nervous about the meetings and finding it difficult to talk about their personal situation, and asking questions that they feel uncomfortable about. So we will do our best to keep you feeling as comfortable as you can and to make sure you get the right support and the right help at the right time. So what to expect from the legal process? Well, as I've already said, there are going to be professionals, divorce professionals probably in play at some point. There's going to be legal jargon, and we're trying to simplify everything as much as possible, because we're so old-fashioned, the law in this country, and the phrases that are used are just silly. But you can always ask, and it doesn't matter how many times you ask, it really doesn't matter. If you're not sure what a phrase is, what it means, you just ask whoever you're working with, or that you can probably rely on Google for. So if it's just a definition of something, but I'll also point you in the right direction with some links where you can get some free help with that. So another thing obviously to expect is that you will probably be faced with uncomfortable and possibly difficult decisions as part of your divorce and separation. And that's again why it's good to have the right support in place, whether that's from professionals, whether that's from friends or family. So it's good to know that. And unfortunately, there isn't a magic wand available to say, right, I know you're in a difficult situation now and you want to be the other side of it. I will wave my magic wand and tomorrow it will all be behind you. It doesn't mean it's all going to be really, really difficult. It doesn't need to be, but it does involve you having to go through the motions and a process to get you to the other side to be able to move on with your life. So it's just worth thinking about, you know, you are going to need to think about things that you may not want to think about. So let's have a look. What else did I put here about things to expect? The most important thing, and I get the wacky finger comes out here, the most important thing to remember is if you have children, your ex is most probably going to be in your life for the rest of your life because you have children together. And that's a bit of a scary concept for some people. But the reason that I'm putting it out there as I am is because it's really important for the two of you as parents to do what you possibly can to try and avoid creating too much additional animosity between the two of you when you go through the process of separation and divorce, because you'll need to salvage some sort of relationship to co-parent the children. And so it's tough. A lot of clients sort of screw their faces up at me and think, oh God, you've got to be joking. But you must do what you can, because to think about obviously putting the children first, which is going to be your priority, but the fact that you're going to need to work together with the other parent after the separation with the kids, whatever age they are, actually, there's still going to be a link between the two of you. The other, it sounds like it's all bad news, isn't it? I'm just sort of trying to give realistic expectations. But the other two things to bear in mind, which I do tend to tell my clients, just so they've got realistic expectations, is the process of actually separating and or divorcing always takes longer than people either hope it will or expect it to. Now, that doesn't mean it's because it's going to be really complicated. It just takes time. It tends to be, a client was saying to me the other day that she knows she's feeling really impatient, that she wants it all to be sorted. And that's the stress. That's quite naturally, she's in an uncomfortable time in her life. She's not enjoying the process. Why would you? And she wants to be the other side of it so that she can move on. But it just does take time. And the other thing as well is it will probably cost you more than you would like to spend. Now, I'm not saying it's going to cost you tens of thousands of pounds, but I think it's realistic to appreciate that actually there is going to be some cost, whatever it may be, whether it's professionals or whether it's whatever it is, to try and get things sorted out. But there are plenty of ways in which you can save money and not let it cost an absolute small fortune. So one of the things actually on that is in the olden days when I was still practicing as a solicitor, people either had a solicitor and we would run the whole case, or people didn't have a solicitor at all and they did it all themselves. The beauty of where we are now in 2021 is that you actually can dip in and out of using your solicitor. So you can tell them, right, I've got to this stage, can you help me with this bit? And then you can say, and now I'm going to do some other bits myself, or I'm going to get help from Rhiannon, or I've got some resources, I can do it myself. And that can save you quite substantially money, so that you're not just using your solicitor to do it. So making sure that you only use them for what you really need them for, and using other people such as myself, other coaches, or even financial advisor to do the other bits and pieces, which is more cost effective for you. And or I've got a huge library of help sheets. So I want to sort of empower my clients to be able to do things themselves, to take back some control in a situation where they might feel a little bit out of control. So I will give them help sheets to see if they can do bits and pieces themselves. If they need any help from me, they can obviously come back to me. Trying to make sure they feel as comfortable as possible. So the dipping in and out of using solicitors, all my solicitor colleagues will be going, no, don't tell them that. But it's true, you don't have to use your solicitor every single step. Obviously, you'll want to know what those steps are and ask them, are you the best person to help me with this? Or should I think about using a coach for this part? Or should I speak to a financial advisor? And, they should be more than happy to explain what's their job, what their role is, and what somebody else's might be. So that's sort of quite an easy way of sort of saving money. I'm conscious I'm wittering on and we've got quite a few questions to go through. So I probably best to stop now and look at the questions. Do you think, Tam?
Yeah, that's fine. We can do a few questions. I think your advice is great. It's really, there's a whole heap of stuff in there that you think, well, like you said, there's all different ways you can go through this process. And I think that the trap people fall into is you panic and you just think, well, I've got a solicitor, that's all I need, off we go. Yeah. Yeah, so no, really, really helpful advice. So I'm happy to go on to some questions, or if you've got a few more points you want to share, equally we can finish those. It's up to you.
No, that's fine. Let's get stuck into some questions. I talk for hours on this topic because obviously it's my bread and butter. It's what I do all day. But it's really, it's really important. It's not just a solicitor you need, and there are ways to save money, and definitely don't need to be thinking about going to court. It's important for you to find out your options and your choices so you can make an informed decision. I think that's the big thing. Knowing what questions you want to ask sounds really simple, but actually, just the process of sitting down with a cup of tea or a gin and tonic and thinking, right, brain dump, what is it that I need answers to, can actually be quite helpful.
No, definitely. I love a list. I'm a list person.
You like lists, yeah.
List, I love writing down, yeah. So what I'll do then, I'll start going through the questions. They're not necessarily in any particular order, but I'll do them in the order that I sent them to you. So I've got the first one then is, I would like to know more about the financial declaration aspect and the hearing processes involving finances.
Okay. So I think that this person, when they say the financial declaration aspect, I think they're referring to what we call in the biz the financial disclosure process. And basically what that is before a couple can even start thinking about negotiating or having discussions to reach a financial agreement, we first of all got to know what finances there are. So this very first starting point is for both parties to collect together their respective financial information. So that's anything to do with them as a financial person. So that's values of properties, pensions, bank accounts, investments, anything, and it also includes debts as well. So this information is very commonly presented in what's called a form or a financial statement. So once you've collected all the information, it's normally presented in this form, and you can have a look at this form and download it for free from the court website. So quite a few, there's quite a lot of information in it. It's actually really good. So the website, it's actually a government website. So it's www.gov.uk. And then when you go into that, it's got a really big search bar. You can put in things like getting a divorce or Form E financial statement, and it will bring up either explanatory notes or the documents themselves if you've asked for a document, and that's all free. So it explains all the processes, what to do, and they've done it as a question and answer thing. So if you're going to look at what happens with legal forms or legal processes, please use the government site rather than just Mr. Google. So just to answer just quickly then, so I think this person is referring to a Form E. So you can go onto that gov.uk, and at the back of the form, I think it's on about page 28. It's really sad that I would know that. It's got a list of all the information that you would collect to complete the form. So look at the back and then know the information. That's quite helpful. And I work a lot with people who are doing their financial disclosure information. So if anybody does need help, you can always book in with me and I can help you with that as well. The court hearings for sorting out finances, so not every case, in fact, not even the majority of cases, go to court to sort out money finances, okay? It's only if you're unable to reach an agreement using lots of other routes that there are, but that's for another discussion. So please don't automatically think you've got to go to court, even if you've got a bit of a stinky ex. So even if you're struggling at the moment with trying to speak to him or her about how you're going to approach finances, speak to your solicitor or speak to me. There are lots of other options we can use. But to answer that question about the court hearings, go back again into the government site, so that the gov.uk site, and you can put in, now I did look this up, you can put in probably finances on divorce is probably enough in the search box, and it will tell you, or going to court for finances might be a good one, and it explains all the different hearings and what may happen. So that's free advice. It's available on the government site, so that's probably the best way. I'm not very sick, am I?
Oh, that's perfect.
To every question.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it is people not knowing where to go, and things like that are really helpful to kind of signpost people to actually, here's where you can get the specific information that you're looking for. So no, I think that's really helpful. The next question, and I know it's one you've touched on a little bit, and someone said, I'm at the beginning of my own process and it's very scary. I would just like to know more about the potential future cost. And I know someone said in the chat as well, if you can let them know again the kind of places they can go, and you mentioned there's quite a lot of sites they can get information on.
Yeah, so with regards to costs, it's very difficult to know at the beginning how much your divorce or separation is going to cost. And the reason for that actually is because how much it costs is more dependent on you and your ex than it is on the legal process. So the more that the two of you can avoid arguing over everything, for want of a better expression, the less likelihood you're going to be overly using the divorce professionals. So the more you fight over things, or the more you can't agree on things, or the more complicated, or if you decide not to communicate with each other, the more complicated things are going to be, the longer things are going to take, the more you're going to need to speak to your solicitor and get help. That's what costs the money. So solicitors charge on an hourly rate. So the more you use them, and the more of their time you spend, the more money you spend. So that's another reason why be careful of how you use your solicitor. Only use them for legal advice. Don't use them for ranting about he was 10 minutes late dropping kids off on Sunday and da 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 da. What you want to be clear on is what you want them to do about any issue that's come up. So cost is a tricky one because it very much depends how much you do yourself and how much then you use professionals. It's worth spending some money with professionals to make sure you get the right advice about your situation. There are lots of ways in which you can save and not spending too much. So cost is a tricky one to give an estimate. However, your solicitor, during your case, if you work with them, is obliged to provide you with cost estimates as you get to each stage. So at the very beginning, when you work with a solicitor, they'll give you an estimate of, if you can agree by this point, it'll cost this or likely to cost this. So they will give you an idea, and they are obliged to give you updates on how things are going and what they think it may cost. A lot of solicitors ask for money up front. So they'll ask for what they call a retainer. They might ask, and it's not a small amount. It might be £2,000 that they want on account to start, because there's normally a flurry of activity right at the beginning. To save money, you want to work with somebody like me, because I can make sure that if you see me at the beginning stages, or even if it's in the legal process, I can help you to know where to use the solicitor and where you don't need to use the solicitor. So that helps to keep costs down, and you can talk to me about everything, and we can decide what you need to use the solicitor for and actually what you can get help with elsewhere. As I said, about there are court fees. So you don't pay to go to court, in a sense, because you're not paying for the judge, you're not paying for the court building, you're not paying for all the staff. What you pay for, if you did go to court, and hopefully you won't, but if you do end up going to court, you're paying for your legal representative to come to court with you. That's what you're paying for. So if you want to avoid going to court, and you go to court if you can't reach agreement with your ex, and there are lots of different options to help you reach an agreement. If you can't, then the judge can make a decision for you. But the more you can try and keep open those lines of communication and try and see if you can be sensible and keep things amicable, it will save you a lot of money. I just saw on Twitter actually an hour ago that the court fee, so there's an application fee for the court, like an admin fee for different applications, and the prices go up, or the charges go up from tomorrow, the 30th. So, and if you go onto my Instagram, I've posted what the new figures are going to be. So I'm at the Divorce Navigator, and it's got what those figures are. So it'll be what the application fee is for divorce, the finances for children. So by all means, have a look at that. I expect it will be in the paper, you know, it'll be online on the news as well. So yeah, it's difficult to give a cost estimate because it's more dependent on the parties themselves and how easily they reach an agreement than actually the legal. There isn't an average cost of divorce. It's tricky.
No, that's great. Thank you. And then just for anyone as well, when I post the recording, I'll put all of Rhiannon's links so you can then find her on Instagram, her website and that. So don't panic if you think, oh God, I can't remember how to get hold of her. Then the next question, I've then had kind of from 3 different people in similar ways, but it's kind of the same general theme of question. So I would like to know about my options if my ex-partner refuses to respond to any communication. I just can't afford the solicitor fees to continuously chase. And I had, like I said, I had a couple of questions from people about what do I do if my ex just doesn't cooperate or just ignores everything that is sent to them by a solicitor, and obviously then the cost to send it again and keep chasing only adds to the cost.
That's always a challenge when you have a non-cooperative spouse, which is the polite way of putting it. It depends on the situation would be my answer to that. So, for example, if you're at the beginning stages and you think, do you know what, I think my ex is going to be really difficult, then you could decide either you're going to have to use the solicitor because they're only going to listen and reply to legal letters, or you have the option of issuing court proceedings. So, but you don't have to have a solicitor for that. You could make the application yourself. So you can, especially since COVID, you can do your divorce side. You've got your divorce, finances and children. You could do your divorce process yourself and just do it online. And that saves a lot of costs. And it's going to be more difficult for your ex not to comply with the paperwork, because there are default dates. They have to reply by a certain date when there's court proceedings in place. When it's to do with money stuff, so if you're trying to negotiate and your spouse isn't providing some financial information, it's difficult. The only person or mechanism that can legally force your spouse to do something is a judge. Obviously, the only way you can get a judge to do it and make sure make that court order is if you apply to the court for court proceedings. And that can be quite off-putting for people because they worry it's then going to cost them a lot of money. Sometimes the threat of court proceedings can be enough to give the uncooperative ex a kick up the bum, and if they don't want to go to court either. But stinky letters from solicitors or potentially court proceedings is unfortunately the only way you can force somebody to do something under the family law banner. So it depends on the situation. I mean, I always try and think outside the box. So if there were any specifics about what somebody wasn't doing, I could try and have a think about what might help them in that particular situation. But trying to be as persuasive as possible and do what you can to get them to cooperate is your best bet. And I know that sounds a bit of a soft response. The alternative is using solicitors, which of course costs money, or issuing court proceedings, and you can do that yourself. You don't necessarily need a solicitor. You can go on the government site and do your application online yourself, and take your ex to court, as it were, to make sure they do what they should be doing.
That's brilliant, thank you. I know that's quite a difficult question to answer because it's so broad. The next question I've got then is, my ex has petitioned me for divorce and I don't understand what happens next. I'm worried about it affecting my rights to see my child.
Okay. So I'm really sorry to hear that, and it can be very scary, especially if you didn't know it was coming, which obviously I don't know the circumstances for this particular situation. So there are 2 parts to that question. One is what happens next, and the other is this going to affect me seeing my children and my child? To answer the what happens next, Yeah, and if you go onto the government website, so www.gov.uk, and put in, I made a note of this because Tam was kind enough to send me this question before. Where have I written it? And if you put in the search bar, respond to a divorce, it brings up a page that tells you what happens next and what you need to do. And it sets it all out really clearly with headings and sections. So that's where I would go if I were you, and have a look at that. But the most important part of that question was, is it going to affect me seeing your child? There is no reason why your spouse divorcing you should affect you seeing your child. So the fact that you're the one that's being divorced has no impact on your parenting of your children. So there's no reason why that should affect anything at all. So it's only in very special circumstances where there's been abuse, for example, that, there may be a risk that, the children arrangements could become quite complicated. But just with a normal divorce, please try not to worry. There's no reason why it should affect your relationship with your children.
Thank you. I think that's something a lot of people worry about when they go into the divorce.
It's a difficult one. It's a really difficult one.
The next one then is, I'm a married person whose husband owned the family home that me and my now adult child moved out of. Is that his asset, or can me and my daughter make any kind of claim? We are legally still married but separated.
If you're married, it makes no difference in whose name any property or assets are registered. You are seen as one pot, one financial pot as a married couple. So even if all the assets, the house and the savings, were all in the husband's name, the wife still has a potential financial claim on that pot. So what you would need to do is get advice from a solicitor about how best to present you wanting or needing to make a claim. But if you're married, it doesn't matter that it's in his name. Yes, you do have potential financial claim.
Brilliant, thank you. And then I've got one. Before my divorce, my mum passed away and I inherited a third of the house. I then chose to pay off my siblings and I now fully own the house. My husband is now claiming the house 50-50 as part of the divorce, but my name is on the deeds. During the marriage, I supported my husband financially. Sorry. Okay. Is there anything I can do to stop this, as it seems really unfair? So I know it's kind of similar to the last question.
Yeah, it's a complicated one. No, I can understand that it would feel really unfair. So you would need to get advice from a solicitor to find out what your options are to try and protect your property. But what would be relevant, so the information that your solicitor would need to know, if it's helpful, is the date you took your share, your initial share of that property, and then the date that you bought out your siblings, and where you got the money from to buy out the siblings. So did you use your savings or whatever, where it came from? And I think those are the three pieces of information that your solicitor would need, because potentially there is a risk, like we mentioned in the last question. If you're a married person, what's yours is theirs and vice versa. So there is, the starting point is, as you said, your husband wants to try and claim on this property. What you'd need to check with your solicitor when you give them those three pieces of information is how best to try and protect that property and how to go about it. It doesn't automatically mean he's going to have 50%, or he might not get any of it. What the solicitor will need to do is look at the bigger picture of your financial situation, and those three pieces of information will be really helpful.
Brilliant, thank you. So they're all the questions I had in advance. I've had a couple pop in the chat now, if you're happy for me to ask those, Rhiannon.
Sure.
I've got one person who's just said, then I'm already divorced and have gone through my divorce, but we didn't do any formal financial arrangements, so nothing was, I'm assuming, like kind of written down or done by like a lawyer or a solicitor or anything.
Yeah.
Does it mean that either party can come back and make a new financial claim retrospectively?
Yes, it does. So you need to get a financial agreement done quick, sharp. So yeah, so there are different elements to the situation. There's the dissolution of the marriage. They've obviously got the divorce sorted out, but you do need to close down the potential of making any future claims. The story I always give to my clients to make sure they understand the importance of the financial settlement is there was a case in the papers years ago, and there was this guy, he was a multi-millionaire. I think he done something about inventing the wind turbine things. Anyway, whatever. But he got divorced from his wife something like 23 years previously. And at that point, neither of them had any money. So there wasn't any money to sort out. There wasn't any finances. So they did an online divorce. They did a straightforward divorce, didn't bother doing a financial agreement. But then 23 years later, his wife made a financial claim on him. Now he was a millionaire, for backdating child maintenance for a child that was probably in their 30s, and she was successful. So that's obviously a really extreme, silly example, but it just makes the point that actually it would be really helpful to get finances sorted. So whether there's anything that, you know, loose ends that need to be sorted out, you know, you're going to have this, you're going to have that, get it drafted, get it formalized. Or the other thing that's really important is for the clauses to go in, this is in full and final settlement, neither of us can come back for anything else in the future. And there's special wording that needs to go in. So you need what's called a consent order. So again, that would be talking to your solicitor, or have a look on the government site about sorting out money and on divorce. But it's a consent order you need to make sure you close off the opportunity, because what if you win the lottery? You don't want, you know, your ex to come back and try and claim.
No, right. I mean, like you said, that's a very extreme situation, but also a very scary one. Because like you said, if you then win the lottery or something in years down the line, you definitely don't want to share it with your ex.
Absolutely.
I've then had, can divorce papers be served to a respondent who lives abroad? Yes.
And what the situation is now is all divorces are being done online. So there's no paper anymore. So it's all being done through the online portal, as it's being called, and it's much easier to save money. People can actually issue their divorce themselves. They don't need the solicitor, and if you do it yourself, you can save about £2,000. So it's quite good, and it's got all the explanatory notes of how to do it. So yes, the answer is you can send things because it's all done electronically anyway.
Perfect. So that is all the questions that I have had. If anyone's got any kind of final questions or anything, please feel free just to drop them in the chat. I don't know whether, if Rhiannon, you've got any kind of final words of advice to leave us with, or final thoughts?
Yeah, so I think sort of just to sort of summarize, it's, you know, it is probably a scary place to be going through divorce and separation, because, you know, your family situation is the most important thing in your world. But please don't feel you need to struggle alone. And if you don't know answers to things, you can find out answers, you can get help. There is great help and support out there. It doesn't have to cost you a fortune, I promise. And just to do a quick plug on the resources I've got available for people. So I work with people on a one-to-one basis, so you can work with me as a consultant, but I also have some ebooks that you can buy and download from my website, which I think might be quite helpful for people to know. And they're quite a huge cost saving on going even to see me, but particularly to see a solicitor. So I can obviously give Tam the links for those, but just quickly, there's one called The First Steps If You're Considering Separation. There's one called Preparing for Divorce. There's one on family mediation. There's one on working with your divorce solicitor, which I'm not going to show any of my colleagues because it tells you all my tips on how to save money with your lawyer. The other thing is that if you work with me on a one-to-one, it's a 2-hour meeting, and I appreciate from a cost perspective that might feel a little bit expensive, but I do run a weekly phone clinic. So you can book in for a 30-minute call with me on a Friday, and you can just ask, it's just a phone call. You can ask me whatever you like. You've got me for 30 minutes and we can go through. We did it very speedily last week because somebody had a lot of questions. It's only as a one-off, so it's only for new clients, but obviously that's open to, the Frollo community. If anybody wants to book in and find out a little bit more or get me to answer their specific questions, then by all means, and I can obviously give you the link of how to book that in yourself.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I've already had a couple of messages in the chat to me that have just said thank you. They found this really helpful. I think all the advice you've given has been absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much, Rhiannon.
Pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I hope it has been helpful for people.
Yeah, it's